Yes, greetings, hello, and a warm welcome back, dear souls. At the moment, I must openly admit, I truly celebrate daily what is happening, while others look into the abyss and see the darkness spread by the media. I must say, what is really behind it? If you understand it, you just have to celebrate it. And in this sense, I first want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your comments on the last videos and for your support. Many, many thanks. It is truly gigantic. Why do so many believe that my videos are groundbreaking, as I could read in the comments? It is, of course, also because from here where I am, the place where I am, I can publish things that I certainly couldn't do from European soil. Therefore, once again, as I said, a heartfelt thank you. You are really amazing. So, today we are going to explore something very, very, very exciting. Sunday is the election day if they take place, hopefully. And I have gathered some very important information, current information, old information, historical information, so that you can really get a good picture. What is the EU really? What is hidden behind this veil of the curtain? Who is Zelensky really? You all know this name by now, but what is behind it? Who is he really? What role does the BRND play these days? And what influence do the USA really have on us? I have decided to make this special broadcast now to give you all a clearer understanding and to sharpen your discernment. It is and will be really exciting, my dear ones. What we have found out, stay tuned. Because these are important pieces of information, or can be, that are now still necessary. See you soon. How could one describe this organization in a single sentence? I'll tell you, a sentence came to my mind that couldn't be more fitting. Ran out of the department store and shouted, "Stop, the dear one." Do you understand what I'm getting at? To explain this to you, there is a name that should be taught in history class. Walter Hallstein. Probably it doesn't mean much to most people. Who was this Walter Hallstein? He is no longer alive. Among other things, he was a lawyer. It was to establish a so-called European economic community with a central government. Well, what do you think we have today? With the EU headquartered in Brussels? Exciting, isn't it? It is the implementation. Community from back then. And here I quote another saying. I know, I speak a bit cryptically and spell out some things. That has something to do with word and text recognition. It is the implementation of the plans from back then. And I just say yes. The Germans lost the war, but they continued afterwards and won. They sat until the 90s, my dears, especially in the CDU ranks and in the old parties. If you didn't know that, then please take a look. I don't know if it's still online. A television documentary that was produced 10, 15 years ago about the so-called bribery scandals back then under our then Federal Chancellor. This film was formerly called Bimbies. Maybe you can still find it online. Everything is revealed there, spoken openly. Unbelievable. Watch it. Okay. The EU, as it seems, is apparently or positioning itself for an escalation against Russia. That's actually no secret anymore. The band is the third strongest economic power among all industrial nations, my dear ones, Germany, and thus also the largest contributor, meaning your tax money to Brussels. All parties stand without budging an inch behind the support of Ukraine, which is not a democracy. That should be mentioned because their leadership was also financed with former official CIA funds from the USA to be a bulwark against Russia. Okay, now let's take a look at Zelensky. Zelensky's task is to be a warmonger, period. He was installed for that purpose. We should understand that. What do you think will happen if, as recently became known, Germany intends to oppose this regime, to transfer 600 to 700 billion euros in defense funds after the elections? Well, but Germany supposedly has no money for daycare centers, children, families, pensioners, health insurance, tax cuts, roads, bridges, and more. But there seems to be money for that. Divide this sum by the number of citizens. That is a hefty debt burden. Let me explain it to you like this. The United States, based on the figures, from 2022, had a defense budget of 177 billion euros. This sum, which is supposed to be transferred there, roughly corresponds to the annual budget, including all military bases worldwide of the United States. Wow. Just for comparison, as of 2022, Russia has a defense budget of only 86.4 million. That is 1/10 of the USA and roughly 1/8 of what is intended to be transferred to Zelensky. Germany itself has only 55.8 billion. That means the money that is supposed to be transferred there is 10 times the German budget. Wow. With this amount, could Zelensky pulverize half the world? Unbelievable. Oh no, I need to correct myself. The whole world. But who exactly is this Zelensky? I have a bit of a concern that many of you don't, or many of you don't know about this president. And therefore, here are a few hard facts. Just information? Okay. Evaluate it as you think best. Zelensky had already banned opposition parties, which questioned his legitimacy. He even froze the entire assets of all party members. He rendered them incapable of action. And he did the same thing again now. He even banned TV stations that were associated with the opposition, took control over all Ukrainian children. Zelensky's term would now end on the 20th, maybe completed. But instead of holding elections, this is what Trump means. He annulled them and suspended the constitution because Ukraine is now at war. Okay, we can leave it at that for now. But please consider the following, what it means. If we allow this reasoning to suspend the constitution to prevent elections, Germany and the EU are in a geopolitical conflict with Russia and China. Well, by now also with the USA. That would also be a reason to suspend all laws. People are being conditioned to accept a dictatorship by instrumentalizing the justice system to target political opponents with one-sided reporting. These are very deliberate power plays, my dear ones, to eliminate opposition. He is basically doing exactly what he was put in place to do and nothing else. Okay. He was installed by the former government, the United States, and the EU. Zelensky refuses to hold elections. Is he far down in the Ukrainian polls? He is, according to Trump, a dictator without elections. And that is purely true from an informational perspective. It is possible that he is the key to dragging Europe into a conflict, as all wars are based on lies, by attacking Russia. Elon Musk posted that the American journalist Gonzalo Lira was arrested and killed by Zelensky. His last tweet, which he published, was, "At the moment I am trying," I quote, "to leave Ukraine and apply for political asylum in Hungary. Either I cross the border and get to safety, or the Kiev regime makes me disappear," and he has disappeared. Kiev has, as we saw yesterday, even attacked the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. The problem with the whole thing is that an attack on this Caspian Pipeline Consortium is not possible without satellite reconnaissance, but Ukraine does not have that. Okay. Here the question arises whether the EU supported carrying out this attack, because only they have the capability for satellite reconnaissance. Just imagine, reflect on it. If Ukraine were to carry out such an attack on German soil, with the help of Russian satellite reconnaissance, folks, dear ones, this would be considered a direct declaration of war by the EU. Medvedev merely stated that the European countries apparently support an endless war, and for that, using in his words, Kiev's drug addicts. Again, Zelensky was installed and positioned precisely for such actions. He is doing his job. But where does Germany stand now? That is the next question we need to ask. After the elections, if the old parties were to win, where do we stand? Okay. I'll put it in really blunt terms now. Where do we stand if the old parties win? We are indeed probably at the same crossroads as in 1939. Putin and Trump have long agreed, dear ones, and want to make peace, and are even negotiating the mutual reduction of nuclear weapons, something we have all wanted for decades. But this means a massive shift of power on the planet. Russia's and the USA's, in this case, against the EU, because they provoke it that way. The Allies against the Axis power. We have nothing else again. We already know all of this, don't we? And yet countless Germans are still in a deep sleep. But this time it might not last 100 years, but be final. I know I use clear and direct words, but that is also important in the current times, because the time for euphemistic expressions is truly over. Now it's about being brutally honest, to say what is happening, and everyone has the right to freely decide how to deal with it. In my last post, dear ones, I already reported that the dropping of atomic bombs on German soil was practiced with German tornado fighter jets. The response from the Chancellor's delegate was that, theoretically, one must practice what one intends to do practically. They constantly tell us, dear ones, what is supposed to happen. And yet, very few listen, because Germans have become tired of opening their minds and looking closely. We owe this to the Tavistock Institute. We owe this to all those institutions of the Allies back then and the Russians. They did a good job there of clouding and subduing the German mind. Nevertheless, there is hope, confidence, because now is the time of awakening. For we are standing at a very historic, once again, at a very historic point in history where if everything goes wrong, everything is supposed to be blamed on the Russians, and that's it. That will then officially be the story that our descendants will be told someday. If there are any left, when a German chancellor stands at the podium then we have here, indeed, as mentioned at the beginning, the thief who runs out of the department store and shouts, "Stop the thief." What you intend to do yourself, you accuse others of. I experience this every day. People also function like that. If you are not able to reflect on yourself, to question your own emotions, then you always push and project everything onto others and point fingers at them. We experience that again today. Okay, this is the duality in which we live. Some manage to go through the day with light thoughts, others with dark ones. Okay? What you plan to do yourself. You accuse others of, namely, the long-planned abolition of Germany, no matter the means. And if it is through a calculated act, that could cost countless people their lives. But we don't want to create a horror scenario. On the contrary, I always say, get out of the fear porn. Even on Telegram, I filter that for you. Recently, something happened that now we come to the enlightening story that no one in the EU seriously expected. No one seriously, really, namely, Donald Trump not only became president of the United States. That was foreseeable for many. The real shocker is he also kept his promises to drain the swamp and is relentlessly following through to fillet the cabal, piece by piece. And with that, Germany has a very big problem. And also the Germans themselves, who are still a bit deluded because they look at Donald Trump, they look at Putin. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference. However, the real truth was announced. Germany has an internal problem that is much bigger. Many refuse to acknowledge the massive corruption, to see in their own country, because we identify with our country. I am German. Okay? So, for those people who cannot self-reflect, as I just said, they always point the finger outward. People look at outside instead of inside. And so the Hermetic laws are always the same in the universe, in the cosmos. As above, so below, as left, so right, and as inside, so outside. If people are not able to reflect on themselves, then they are also not able to reflect on the current political situation in Germany. Because they reject it, they don't want to hear it. It has something to do with emotions. Instead, they focus on pointing fingers at others, even though those others are actually doing it better. They are showing us how it's done. Simply unbelievable, isn't it? Because that is the path of least resistance. That is the comfortable way. That is what I call ignoring and looking away. Anyone who believes the hollow phrases of today's politicians regarding the meaning of the word democracy is far off the mark. They deny the abolition of freedom of speech. At the same time, they are now demanding, especially the leftists, through court orders, that Platform X, meaning X for Germans, can no longer be used. Well, what else is that? Other than censorship and freedom of speech, people, we can see it, we just have to look. Now we come to a special political guest. I'll call him now, so you know exactly who I mean, the Hawk. Okay? So, the Hawk files over 900 criminal charges there against German citizens. Well, because they express their personal truth, and consider him incompetent. Now, he actually labels, as of today, read tomorrow Donald Trump as a right-wing radical in the media as well. It's incredibly cheeky in a way and compares himself to the rebels with Luke Skywalker from Star Wars, who goes up against Darth Vader. Is he really slipping into such fantasy worlds? Requires more European funding to support Zelensky, who could lead the world into total war. Brilliant performance, dear Germany. I personally wonder if the USA and Russia can watch this calmly. And I'm so curious about what might still come. This is going to be an incredibly exciting time. Again, on my agenda, from what messages we receive, it seems that we are not on the timeline of war. Something will happen. There will be a solution. And I also believe I know from which side it will come. But folks, it gets much, much better. Watch out. This is truly an amazing video. Today, I'm excited. I'm not celebrating myself. I'm celebrating you. I'm celebrating the messages. I'm celebrating the information on the internet. I'm celebrating all that is becoming obvious and being unmasked, and that's why I'm so happy with you. So watch out. I recently shared in a post that in the state of the Second German Empire, from 1871, there was a maximum tax of 10%, and the unemployment rate was below 1%. It was a country with little crime, and everyone was doing well. The 10th point, the income, the perseverance was enough to support the whole family and even go on vacation. In my childhood, it was still the case that my father could go to work and support the whole family. That is no longer possible today. In almost all cases, only in a few. And now please compare that again with today. Really consciously go into this thought after deducting all taxes, including inheritance, real estate, value added, and everything else. Alcohol, tobacco tax. Universities have calculated that the Germans, and now brace yourselves, around 81% of their income is given to the BRND, to the company, 81%. You work almost 9 to 10 months just to give it away. Where is the outcry? And above all, even more importantly, where has the money gone? Just as Trump says in the USA, where has the money gone? Poverty is rising in Germany, especially among retirees and the elderly who built our country, exponentially. And parallel to crime, precedent. Do you want to know where the money has gone? I have a suspicion. When we look at the incredible cleanup operation by the US government, And we now have examples. One must realize that most certainly indeed the swamp of corruption, fraud, and embezzlement of taxpayers' money has reached truly unimaginable proportions. We also had a mafia boss as president in the USA for several years. Please take a look at the film Barry Seal with Tom Cruise. It is a partial aspect of the history of the Clinton family, showing how money was laundered there. There are over 60 million more Social Security numbers than insured individuals, as has been discovered under the current government. Some of them are already 200 to 300 years old, older than the United States itself, and continue to receive benefits officially. Well, we know where the money is going, just not who has it, not yet. $40 billion, 40 million, went to a scientist in Wuhan, which probably led to the emergence of COVID-19. Hundreds of millions per year were spent by the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, on Starbucks cupcakes. Who believes that USAID, now it gets interesting, funded 6,200 journalists and 707 news agencies in 30 countries. Subsidiaries of the deep state funded with stolen tax dollars to attack political enemies. Only politicians. It's unbelievable. Received $34.3 million from various government agencies. 26.9 million were funneled from health and social services there. Pensioners received 9 million from the Department of Defense. 3.3 million to British television. Trump stated that USAID was controlled by a group of radical lunatics, and he is putting an end to it, and he is on it. He is following through. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. USAID, I just call it AED, acted as a global economic hitman and collaborates with the Federal Reserve, the World Bank, and the IMF to enslave non-G7 countries through debt and lead them into poverty. John Perkins, an author, revealed in his book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, a brilliant title anyway, that institutions like the IMF and USAID are tools for destabilizing governments, which are a cabal of corporations, banks, and political elites. Who doesn't know the TV series Die Anstalt on German television? They have shown exactly that the EU does the same. Through subsidiaries? It's unbelievable. Nothing different is happening here. Do you seriously believe that it's any different in Germany? In the third largest industrial power? Of course, it will be the same here. Probably does the same. Same but different. And it goes much further. The tax pot seems to have been a self-service store in recent decades. That's clear. The EU, for example, in Brussels is also interesting. That's just one example, just one of probably hundreds about lobbyists in Brussels. Subsidizes an enormous amount. That's our money. That's where the 81% goes, among other things. For example, dairy products, where German entrepreneurs then earn billions for export to Africa. Why do they do that? Quite simply, they are so heavily subsidized that the price of milk there in Africa is lower than any local could ever produce. And this keeps the country poor, small, and in servitude. And that's with our money. This has to stop. These are your funds. And yes, although I live in South America, I still pay in Germany. Withholding tax, that's not how it is, okay? So And this is how these countries are really kept on a drip. Bureaucracy has gotten out of hand. No change is visible. Do we want change now or not? A few are lining their pockets with our money. And it still seems to be tolerated. Why are so few happy, I wonder, that the Americans want to drain every swamp in their country? Swamp? Trump is good, it fits too. Want to drain every swamp. They are showing us how it's done. We can see how it works, how it can work. And instead of following their example, Germany dazzles with half-truths and distortions, the truth out, and asks the tax authorities. Continues to ask them to fill their own pockets, period. For decades, I really had to listen to how the German, typically, I didn't hold back either, back then, complained and complained and complained about governments because he is being exploited. Now, there is a real chance to change that, and very few want it. People are afraid of change. They have gotten used to the new normal. Well, they do whatever they want anyway. I can't change anything anyway. Far from it. With this pessimistic attitude, of course, nothing can change. And the government is happy about it because it can do whatever it wants. I'll read something to you. It will shock some. The German paragraph, look it up on Google. Section 129 of the StGB ISM Penal Code. Pay attention. Unbelievable. You just have to read it. Punishable by imprisonment of up to 5 years or a fine. Whoever founds an association or participates as a member in an association whose purpose or activity is aimed at committing crimes. Okay, so paragraph 1, the one I read out, is not applied. Now hold on tight. If the association is a political party, which the Federal Constitutional Court has not declared unconstitutional, people, they are justifying fraud, criminal association, and everything that goes with it, and absolving themselves. According to international law, this is, of course, untenable. Everything, but they tell us it's in the Penal Code. Penal Codes. StGB. Please Google it. Unbelievable, isn't it? Just a thought. If we were to let the American investigation teams for this swamp run free in Germany, what do you think? How much money was approximately embezzled there? Maybe it's so much that we wouldn't even be able to comprehend it. And do they want to prevent all of this exactly with the current actions? Since all governments and authorities were privatized, that's everything. Companies, courts, police, authorities, registration offices, town halls. It seems that the whole thing has been perverted. And what is so hard to understand about the fact that it stands in the room, that there are groundbreaking talks of a lasting peace between Russia and America. Isn't that what everyone has wished for decades? Now it's happening. But the EU wants to make the Russians the enemy. And now also the USA. And something else? Why do the rulers take it upon themselves to oppose the new administration of the United States so massively? Yet they know very well indeed that the United States is the sheriff in Germany. I don't need to tell you anything about the occupation statute. I explain that in my books, Freedom Through Truth. Freedom Through Truth, Volume 2 in detail. By now, it's no longer a secret, although it is still often denied. I mean, even Gregor Gysi contacted M24 back then, a few years ago, and said literally, yes, man, one could finally abolish the occupation statute. That would be wonderful. Well, it keeps coming through. Do those at the top really believe that Brussels can cover for them and they can get away without consequences? What do you think? Why are so many files on scandals in Germany kept secret? We should perhaps be allowed to take a look inside. In a democracy? Or what do you think we can... How? Let's move on. We just want to play out the scenario now. What could a government look like that aims to prevent all corruption in the future and maintain a true rule of law? What would be necessary? Okay, let's play it through. And I'm interested to know if you share the same view about what I'm going to tell you now. So, if all the voting lists of an election are stored on a decentralized and secure blockchain, then no election fraud can occur. The counts would also all be stored in this cryptically encrypted, that's the purpose of a blockchain. This way, the people have control. For verification. All governments would also have to be stored in this decentralized blockchain so that everything is transparent. Every cent of tax money would become very easy to trace. A nightmare for the Kabbalists, and there can be no more corruption. It won't work anymore. No money can be laundered abroad or spent on anything that doesn't correspond to its actual purpose. Lobbyists would all become unemployed. Billions in savings of our funds. And so every proposed bill would also be stored there. An interesting idea? All central banks, and now it gets really amazing, would be abolished. There must be no more fiat money. A new currency would need to be introduced, one that is fully backed by intrinsic values. Covered, for example, gold, silver, platinum. Honest money in an honest system. Money is not bad per se, only what has been done with it. The money is taken out of the hands of private bankers, which is the most important thing, and given back to the state. And by states that are no longer bankrupt, since 1933, where it belongs. It is unthinkable, my dear ones, but currently a reality that a state, or a government, let's call it that, must ask a private bank for permission to produce and print money. This would end all the prolonged bankruptcies we have had since 1933. Then there will be no more debt money system. We are not paying for something, we are just balancing out. That is happening currently. Next point, the assets of all exposed criminals from government circles must be confiscated and returned to the state fund. This would lead to mass arrests to drain the swamp. Would you welcome that? Wouldn't that be an incredibly important step towards freedom? Financial relief for the population? I can imagine that all of this would lead to the tax burden shrinking significantly by more than half for everyone. And now I'll tell you something. The current American administration and government has only one sentence for all the aforementioned points that were just discussed. That's what's coming! Exclamation mark. That's quite a bombshell, isn't it? That's an atomic bomb. Do you now know why the EU has sweaty hands and is gasping for air? We all have the same experiences, my dear ones. Almost none of us haven't already been outraged about it. That before the election is not the same as after the election. Promises are constantly broken. And most of the time, even the opposite is implemented. We are all aware of that. How about now, purely hypothetically? With a party. I'm not a fan of party systems, right? Understand me correctly, but we are only arguing based on what we have in the here and now. That's important, okay? What about a party that keeps all its election promises based on which you voted for them? Does something like that even exist? And I say, we are at a historical turning point. Why? I'll explain it to you, and it's so simple. It's so easy. Once you understand it, you see so much. Many of you are aware that Alice in Wonderland also, cryptically, has met with J.D. Vance as well as Elon Musk to coordinate and agree on common goals. Are the election promises of this party to be taken seriously for the first time in the history of the FRG? Can you trust that? The answer will surprise you. But I believe that's not essentially the point. And I'll explain it to you like this. This question hardly arises for me because the American government has made it clear and explicit that they really mean it seriously. And they are pursuing it relentlessly. Russia and the USA will certainly come to an agreement. That is on a really good course. Only the EU is the central problem because they absolutely want to get into the conflict. The election promise from Alice in Wonderland states that they are the only ones who don't want it. They don't want the war either. And if you look at the election program, it is part of what is currently happening in the USA to some extent. However, it has now been agreed upon in case this party wins and does not break its election promises, not towards the voters, that's not the point, they always do that, but towards the USA, then that would be a massive breach of trust, which this time could really have catastrophic consequences for all involved. You don't lie to the sheriff. And from this perspective, I assume that these election promises will be implemented properly and diligently. And even more, because it is a joint course, and now it must be adhered to. There can no longer be any servility within the country because it has been agreed upon internationally. Okay. In conclusion, I must say that there are currently esoteric and also spiritual ambassadors, I don't want to name names, who still believe that everything, really everything, is deep state. Again, we live in duality and there is light and shadow. I refuse to accept that the shadow still holds the upper hand. Otherwise, all the talk, all the chatter about the rise in consciousness, Earth, cosmos, would not be possible at all. That also needs to be cleared up. We live in duality, and the light is currently breaking through, making its way and driving out the shadow. And that should be seen and flow into your own prayers. After all, it is exactly what we have all wanted for a long time. If someone doesn't have the opportunity to vote now, then it indirectly means supporting the old parties, quite clearly. and supporting the cabal. We really cannot yet fully grasp the big picture. That's true. This game is too complex for that. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, could, would. That doesn't help any of us now, because there are higher plans behind it. However, the light can only unfold piece by piece. We must also be clear about that, because it cannot remove all stumbling blocks and obstacles at once, as some would like. Stone by stone is now being removed. So let's first see what we have. Be thankful for what we see, for the successes that are currently visibly manifesting externally. It can hardly be more visible. And they are mundane, what we see now. These things are already bigger than what many could have imagined in the past. To conclude, 2 announcements that I found really cool, that I found really great. Just yesterday, I learned that Robert Kennedy Jr. has initiated that in the USA, as nature intended. There are now, again, man, woman, female, boy, and girl. Period. End of the gender madness. Because the germ cell in every body is simply there. No matter what you do with your body, male or female, for a lifetime. Can everyone do what they want with their body? No question. But again, that should remain private. And it doesn't need to be brought into the public, just to further distract us from our true being. You know, it is so important that masculinity and femininity unite, the mudra of Jeshua. And that is being destroyed. If no one knows anymore whether they are here or there and who they are, then they can't unite it anymore. Quite simple. Furthermore, second announcement, the US government announces that Trump and Musk, and I celebrate this too, are going to Fort Knox to verify for themselves that the alleged 4,580 tons of gold are still there. So there are quite a few things that little birds have been chirping about. They will weigh and check every gram of gold. Musk even suggested, actually a super interesting idea, setting up a live stream for RS citizens during the monitoring, observation, and control. Actually, brilliant. No one has been allowed to look inside. Since 1974, just think about that, over 50 years, 51 years. No one from the public. These rooms have entered. Wow. I think a lot is happening at the moment. It's impressive. What's happening? I hope that this contribution could shed a bit more light into the darkness, that we could install a bit more light together to make the shadows smaller and drive them away, sending the darkness to the dog's blanket. As a good acquaintance of mine always says, with whom I have a conversation tomorrow. Look, and that's exactly it. It's all happening right now. Let's just take a look and welcome it. Let's put good, positive energy into it, because then we strengthen it. We strengthen it. Never underestimate the power of your own creative force and the resonances you personally contribute to the field, so that those who have the courage and strength to implement what we are currently seeing in government circles in the United States. These people live dangerously because they are confronting an adversary that has brought darkness to the earth for millennia. And that's why we now simply stand for the light and support it with all our being and actions. Light also remains. Because, you know, we all have shadow sides, we all have bright sides, and we decide anew every day whether we serve the light or the darkness. And when we support the light within us, we also support it externally. Be blessed. Have a wonderful week. And I look forward to everything that comes. See you soon.